a chiropractor, DIBAK. Not sure about that acronym, Dr. Rostenberg. Kinesiologist, functional medicine expert, methylation researcher, author, and director of Red Mountain Natural Medicine in Boise. Founder of Beyond MTHFR, a leading voice in the emerging field of functional medicine and genetics, raising awareness of how genetic variation impacts our health. In addition to running a busy practice, Dr. Rostenberg has developed cutting-edge protocols using methylation pathways designed to optimize biochemistry, detoxification, digestion, brain function, and more. Due to the popularity of his Beyond MTHFR YouTube channel and website, he has attracted patients from all over the world who seek to optimize their genes and change their lives. He has clinical experience treating patients of all ages and walks of life, ranging from elite athletes and children to those suffering from complex digestive, autoimmune, and neurological diseases. He wrote and published the book, Your Genius Body. Maybe I can get a discounted copy of that, Dr. Rostenberg. To help patients better understand how to optimize their genes and change their lives. Dr. Rostenberg is a sought-after lecturer, so we have him today, and teacher, presenting seminars throughout the U.S. and internationally. When he's not helping patients and living a better, rewarding life, he enjoys spending time with his family, rock climbing, skiing, hiking the mountains, and reading. And this morning when I talked to him, he was busy making breakfast for the kids, right? Right while he was talking to me. Now, is that a resume or what? All right, so that's that. Now, I want to get into asking Dr. Rostenberg, first of all, if I can, if you can unmute yourself. I want to ask you how you learned about X39.
Well, I'd like to say thanks for the nice introduction, Savvy, and it's just nice to connect with everybody today on this call because, as you pointed out, we are here to help make the world a better place, and it's not a ego-driven process necessarily. It's just, you know, good ideas. If we find good ideas, we want to tell other people about them, and that does move the world in the right direction. So I actually have to thank my friend, Dr. Harmon, he was the first chiropractor and really first chiropractor I met when I moved and started my practice in Boise. And we go way back, so we can joke about those early days, early stressful days when you start a business from scratch and everything. So he saw me as a little sprout, and then we've been friends since then, and seen both of our successes happen over the ensuing, about a decade of time. But basically the reason I found out about patches, I was completely and totally blissfully unaware of LifeWave. So I have to point that out. I don't have a multi-year background in patches. That's just not something that was on my radar screen for whatever reason. But a few months ago, my good friend, Dr. Harmon, stopped by, and I was busy with patients, and he dropped something off and talked to my staff. And at the end of the day, my staff was like, "Hey, Dr. Harmon dropped this off. You should check it out." And I'm like, "Huh, that was nice of him." And honest to God, I didn't break out my computer and start researching it and digging in right away. I think it sat on my top of my pile of to-dos for a couple weeks, but something, I would say, divine intervention just said, you need to check this out. And I also have to point out that when you're in practice and you're in business, as many of you know, you get phone calls all the time. People are always knocking on your door to try stuff, do this, the next best thing. We have the better service, blah, blah, blah. So you kind of have your defense mechanism up a little bit when people, drop stuff off and say, "Hey, try this. This is the best thing. Or, you got to check this out." So I had to maybe get over my own hesitation.
Sure.
But there was a voice in my head that said, "You got to check it out." And I always save a little, even though I might be a little skeptical about new stuff, I always have to save a little bandwidth with the idea that something amazing might be sitting there right in front of me, and I would be just an absolute fool if I didn't check it out. So that's kind of how it started back in May. And I started to talk to John about how he was using it and how he was talking about it with his patients. And what kind of results he was seeing, and his answers were quite impressive to me, and I trust him, and I took that as my invitation to continue to learn more. That's kind of how it showed up on my radar.
Dr. Rostenberg, did you try it personally yourself, or did you use it on a family member, or how'd that happen?
That's a good question. What I ended up doing after talking to John, I got on the phone with him one night, and he was like, hey, I'll walk you through how to sign up. And, I wasn't ready to commit to being a diamond, but I think I started gold. And Dr. Harmon does such a good job explaining everything. He really does have a gift, with business and just helping, it was just like a no-brainer. I was like, well, okay, I need some patches on hand to at least give to patients. How do I know if they're going to work or not unless I can, give some away? Kind of as you said before in your introduction, the giver mindset. So I was taking a page out of Dr. Harmon's book and just giving people 4 patches at a time in my practice. So I would say I probably gave it to maybe a dozen people before I started to get a sleeve myself and wear it every day. So I have definitely personally noticed changes in my wife. As many of us, know our partners. If you're into nutrition yourself as an individual, sometimes it's hard to get your family to, take 35 supplements a day, do detoxes and all that fun stuff. But putting a patch on is that's an easy sell. So she started to wear it, and then, she wore it for a day. The next day she's like, man, I noticed a difference. I can't really put my finger on it quite yet, but I had more energy. I slept better. And so that led us both to, using the patch now for the past, about 10 weeks.
So what was your thinking in your practice, right? I mean, like, give me a couple of examples of people that you were working on and you said, you know what, I think the patch can benefit these people. Was it literally chiropractic type things, or would it be more like something else, like soft tissue inflammation, or maybe something to do with depression? I mean, what were you thinking in terms of when you first started using it?
It's a great question, Savvy. Not to knock or to make my professors back at my chiropractic college squirm a little bit, but I would say I wasn't necessarily thinking of it purely in the chiropractic sense, because moving bones and getting your body to stay in alignment has enormous benefits. I mean, miracles come from that. But as you work with patients in a practice like ours, we spend a little more time than normal than most chiropractors do with their patients. So I have insight into my patients' stresses, if they're getting divorced, if their family member's sick, what their history is. So there's just this like depth of the relationship. And so patients come into our practice and they're so committed. They're completely committed to doing whatever they need to do to move forward, to be better. And so I'm looking at them doing good dietary choices. They're taking good nutritional supplements. They might be doing programs to help with irritable bowel, or, they got on antibiotics and they're having trouble with that. And so they're in the midst of all of that stuff that they're dealing with. They typically come to an office like mine as a last resort. I'm not exactly, the first place somebody goes calling when trouble strikes. So by the time they've maybe, been to 12 or 15 doctors, for example, and they're literally at this point praying to God, like, I'll do anything I need to do to get better. I see that as an open invitation to say, well, patient, we've got your structure, we got you adjusted, we figured out what foods you should avoid, we've got some nutritional updates, some nutritional protocol for you. But at the same time, there's this new technology that helps stimulate your stem cell productions. Would you be interested in hearing a little bit about that? So I kind of asked it I offer it to them as a question. 98% of the time someone says, well, yeah, tell me more about that. So to answer your question, long answer to short question, I think there's a broad, really anybody can benefit. Obviously we're biased. Anybody can benefit from stem cell stimulation, but these patients who have Parkinson's, strange tremors, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, thyroid issues, obesity. I mean, these are patients of mine who are begging me to do anything I can to help them. So first rule is do no harm. Do no harm. So nobody was harmed making the patch. No babies were killed. You didn't take it from another creature.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer for me to say I can stand behind it 100%.
So it sounds like you're getting some of the, I don't want to say the worst of the worst, but you're getting some tough cases coming to you, and obviously you're up to the challenge and it did say in here that you're dealing with neurological problems, autoimmune and digestive. And then you're dealing with the MTHFR pathway. Can you just real short explain that pathway and the problems there?
Absolutely. So it sounds like you're abbreviating a very inappropriate thing to say around children, MTHFR. It's kind of the running joke, right?
My wife hit me with that last night. And
I don't know how the scientists, where they're, it's like a wink and a nudge there, but
yeah.
Basically, we know that genes are powerful. We know that, and but they're not our destiny, right? Your genes are not your destiny. They're just your tendency, especially if you're under stress. So when bodies go through over-exercising periods of overtraining, they're working too hard, working two jobs to try to keep a roof over your head. You have a job during the day that's tough, and then you have to take care of a sick family member at home and be the nurse. Heaven forbid somebody in your life is really sick and you can't afford in-home care, so you're kind of dual tasking. I mean, these are the things that my patients are telling me they're going through. So what that basically means is there's genes out there that we inherit. They're very common in certain populations, and it's called methylation is basically the big topic, and it's a biochemical pathway. And what makes it so important, it's kind of analogous to stem cells. Stem cells is not some process that only happens in your hair follicles or in your eye cells. It happens everywhere. It could go, any cell in your body could benefit from stem cells, and the same thing is true of this MTHFR gene mutation that's out there. It's in every cell, and it's so fundamental to how our body works that if you get it right and that system is supported, your body has resiliency when it's under stress. It's able to eliminate toxins very efficiently. It can recognize cancer cells when they're growing. It can turn those cells off. It can get the immune system to remove those cells. The flip side is also true. When people have this genetic tendency, as we say, to not have this pathway going as fast as other people, then issues like cancer, depression, and heart disease are actually more common in these family lines. But it's not that it's always going to be common. What it means is that if you don't know you have a genetic tendency for this problem and you eat a standard modern American diet, the genetics is loading the gun, and then with your choices, you keep pulling the trigger, and eventually something's going to happen.
So let me ask you this then. The fact that David Schmidt says that the X39 can regulate up or down over 4,100 genes, have you thought about that now when you're talking about autoimmune, neurological, gut issues? I mean, I'm sure you're like thinking in terms of how can I use this? How can I use this? And do you think in terms of patching in different locations?
I'll admit that I need to continue to experiment with different locations of patching. So I try to I give my patients so much homework. There's so many different moving parts when people come into natural medicine and they change their diet and they're taking supplements and they're doing protocols, that if we can give them something simple and effective to do that's easy to remember, they're more likely to be compliant. So that's maybe my excuse for working just with the triple warmer alarm point, which is really what that position below the navel is in acupuncture on the conception vessel, and then back on the base of the neck. But absolutely. I mean, if I'm going to make a video and put it on YouTube, I mean, yes, it's nice to be popular. We all get dopamine when people clap for you and give you a pat on the back and say, hey, you did a good job. But the really bigger idea is, if there's something out there that could help people, that's affordable, that's safe, that does no harm, when I looked into the research on GHK peptides based on, what Dr. Harmon had mentioned to me, I was really blown away by the quality of the research. And that's, in a nutshell, that's why I'm behind this product. That's just the way my brain works. I want to know how things work. I was always growing up taking everything, all the toys my parents got me, I always took them apart and got in trouble. So
let me ask you this, because earlier this morning, I remember you mentioning a figure like 90%. So I'm assuming you're getting good feedback from your patients, and you mentioned that you like to cut the objections off early as regards placebo. Can you share that?
I think in general, when we communicate with people, the world is full of advertisements and movies and TV shows and billboards and stuff they send you in the mail that's trying to extract money from you. The world is literally full of people trying to extract money from you. And we build up a little bit of we have to armor ourselves and have a little defense against that. And that's just a natural, side effect of being conscious and alive at this point in time. So I found it useful for me as I talk to people about patches to, under promise and over deliver, right? So I'm not trying to promise people the moon. I think Dr. Harmon does a great job of that too. He's, it's not like you're going to have in 4 nights of trying this, let's say you give them 4 patches as a test, just as an open invitation to try something, it could revolutionize how they feel. And certainly we've had some feedback that way. But I think it's important just to point out that as you talk to people about these ideas that are foreign to them, I mean, most people that I speak to have quote, heard of stem cells. They haven't spent 50 hours reading about GHK pathways, so they don't really know if there's anything to it. And MLM, in all honesty, guys, right? MLM has a reputation in the world that has rubbed people the wrong way. I would say the same thing for being a chiropractor. Honestly, we have a public relations issue in my profession. Some of it's warranted, but a lot of it isn't, and the same is true with MLM. So I try, in short, I try to just take the objections away from people. I say, hey, look, it is multi-level. That upsets some people, but it kind of gets on my nerves sometimes too. I'm saying this to the patient just so they know that I'm not just a cheerleader who doesn't think. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody. That's the way in my clinical situation that I find the best way to communicate it. But I say, but sometimes great things come and from areas you weren't aware of. And I would really encourage you to, keep an open mind about this because, I would put my whole reputation and everything I'm doing in practice on the line and say, this thing helps people. Right. So
yeah. So do you have a couple of examples of benefit that folks have got?
Probably the strongest story I've seen so far. I have a patient of mine. I talked about this in the video. He's 72 and he's been diagnosed with some kind of brain atrophy. Basically, it's more like mad cow disease than it is like Alzheimer's, but they really quite don't know what it is. So he's worked with neurologists and they've been to specialists and no one really has much of an answer aside from, well, you're just going to slowly lose function of your body, and that's what your life is going to be like. And so he would normally wake up, he can barely get himself dressed, he doesn't help out around the house. He's got a wife who also takes care of 2 other, she's like the caretaker for other people in the family who are also not healthy. So there's a lot of burden and stress in that family. And so he basically he gets up in the morning, he may have a cup of coffee, nibble on some breakfast, he goes, sits in a chair and just sort of, zones out on TV and passes out, and he sleeps sort of taking naps all day long, not really participating in the world around him. And so I give the wife some patches to try. And this was one of the, maybe the first month we're using the patches. First do no harm. There's really no risk. There's no risk, not going to hurt anybody. Worst thing is I wasted $12 giving somebody 4 patches, boo-hoo,
Sure.
But the cool thing is what happens next. So on a Saturday morning, she puts one on, they're having company over. He gets up, has breakfast, has coffee, doesn't sit down, doesn't go back to sleep, gets up and walks around the house and talks to people for 5 or 6 hours straight. And she's just cannot believe what she's seeing. And she basically tells me, quote, I couldn't get him to shut up. So to go from, basically not participating in the world around you and being almost a vegetable to standing up, walking around and talking to people all day long, that was a big change for that family. And so she thought it was a fluke, who knows, fluke, whatever. It could have been something in the air. The stars aligned a certain way. Who knows what it was. Wakes up the next day, day 2, puts a patch on him, doesn't sleep, doesn't pass out at all, doesn't sit in his chair all day long. He's up and around, starting to, do some chores, starting to participate in the world around him. Same thing happens on the 3rd day. So there's 3 days in a row. And then on the 4th day, she's busy off doing, something else earlier in the day, and she doesn't get the patch on him, and he kind of reverts back to his old self. So she comes in later that week, like the day after, just out of breath, just exasperated. She's like, what is this stuff? How does it work? What, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you know. And then, you know, that was clearly the patch supporting that GHK pathway, helping this individual make stem cells, is helping his brain repair itself. We get sick. The body can heal from anything. There's literally no known disease known to man that nobody has that every disease we've ever talked about, there's a person out there who's spontaneously remissed from. That's a scientific fact.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between that person and everybody else? So the way my understanding is that the body's never makes a mistake. I don't care if you have cancer, if you have an autoimmune disease, you have chronic migraines, or, you know, peripheral neuropathy in your feet. I mean, even though it hurts and it's affecting your life, under the circumstances that the body's in every day, the intelligence that the body was built with is perfectly choosing the most efficient and effective way to navigate that problem and keep you alive one day longer. That idea, that's what I feel makes me inspired to work as a doctor, because I get to work with that energy. I mean, that to me is like, if only our human brains could be that smart and make those kind of decisions. So you start, go ahead.
And what you're saying is that the body is always having an intelligent response, right?
Without a doubt, you can take it to the bank. Even we're talking the absolute worst disease process you can imagine, even stage 4 cancer. If the body wasn't making an intelligent response, they would be dead yesterday. But the body is so efficient, and it doesn't play hard to get. It doesn't play passive aggressive. It doesn't get back at you for what you said 2 weeks ago and made it feel embarrassed. It doesn't have that kind of energy that we carry around inside our head. It just literally acts every second of every day in our best interest. And I just think that is so, well, it's humbling. It's just an amazing thing to recognize. We need to remind ourselves of that.
Genius, like your book says, genius. So let me ask you this then. Is it safe for me to say then, as in with that patient of yours, they were doing better, they took the patch off and they kind of backslid. So is it safe for me to say that in cumulatively over time, because we're talking about stem cells, you know, the benefit gets more and better and better and better cumulatively over time. Is it safe to say that?
I think that's a safe statement. So if he took a patch off, he wore it for 3 days, and then he took 3 steps forward, and as soon as he took it off, he took a step back. So let's say he wears it for 3 months and then he runs out and doesn't reorder. It might take him 2 weeks before he notices a step back. And then let's say he wears it for 6 or 9 months. It might take him a month of not wearing the patch before he slips back, with the understanding that most people would not want to risk the slip back because life is too precious, it's too short.
Right.
But that would be the way I would understand how the body would respond, that you're building a foundation that you can't see with your eyeballs because it's happening inside.
Right.
But yes, it requires that consistency of habit to create the foundation. So I mean, by the time you have a diagnosis of multiple systems atrophy and you've lost 70% or 80% of your energy and your cognitive function, well, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So if you could find a drug that stopped the decline, that drug, someone would pay $3,000 a month for that drug.
Sure.
But you don't have to pay that much. You could, so that's where I see the value for patients. They understand that wow, not even just not getting worse is worth it.
Yeah.
If we get better, all the more bonus, right?
And for less than $5 a day. So can we get some applause